Dear colleagues, we continue our working day. And the topic of the next event: private enforcement of judicial decisions. What to expect? Serhiy Shklar, Deputy Minister of Justice of Ukraine for Enforcement Service, and Pavlo Moroz, Deputy Minister of Justice of Ukraine for State Registration. First, Serhiy is given the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to speak about the emergence of the new institution, the institution of private enforcers. You know that laws were adopted by the Supreme Council about the law on enforcement proceedings, and according to this legislation, that these laws were put into effect on the 5th of January, and in Ukraine we will have mixed system of enforcement of court decisions, and we will have also private enforcers in Ukraine. So
when we look at this pattern, we can see that similar mixed systems and mixed enforcement systems exist in many countries of the of the world. It's not a know-how. I mean, the private enforcement officers. So who are the enforcement officers, private enforcement officers? The private enforcement officer could be a citizen of Ukraine, not younger than 25 years of age, with education in the area of law, with a special etc. Also, there are some people who have experience in the enforcement area. They should not pass all the exams. They could be appointed as private enforcement officers based on their previous experience.
З боку представників Мін'юсту, комісії Мін'юсту відносно.
Then some people have to comply with the special requirements of the Ministry of Justice, and having passed all those stages and having complied with all those standards, then private enforcement officers can start the operation. Currently, we have announced the first training session for private enforcement officers. There will be the Institute of Law under the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine. The training course would take 23 days, and plus additional training in NAIS under the Ministry of Justice to learn how to work with state registers and get their personal electronic keys for their access to those registers. So the first interesting topic for future private law enforcement officers is the test. The test was developed jointly by Ukrainian experts and by Ukrainian and foreign experts. This work was carried out with support of USAID support, Center for Commercial Law, and support to the Justice Reform in Ukraine project. The test will last for 4 hours, and the applicants will pass 3 big blocks of tasks, up to 1,800 of questions.
100 питань з тих 1800, на які він має дати відповідь. Другий блок – це 5.
The second block will present optional scenarios, and the applicant will need to choose out of that scenarios. Then the third block of questions will suggest to select right decision, and will require to prepare a procedural document. So, having got needed amount of points, each applicant will be given the passage score, so to say. I think that will do as of now. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, to Pavlo Moroz.
Павло Мороз, заступник.
Good afternoon. I'm Pavlo Moroz. I'm Deputy Minister of Justice on the state registration issues. I'm grateful to Serhiy for invitation to this event, and I would like to tell you that currently the ministry very actively undertakes reform of the law enforcement system in Ukraine. This is very much awaited reform by the society, and as usually there are some fears among professional lawyers and among citizens whether this reform has a chance to be successful. I do not share those fears and doubts because I believe that we have some positive experience, for example, in decentralization of registration services. And we authorized local authorities to register private entrepreneurs, real estate properties, etc., which removed the corruption component from this process. Then we have the problem with the rating of our country in the international rating of business property and private property protection. Also, we had inherited some legacy, some bad legacy from 1990s, and unfortunately, due to the latest change in legislation, raiders used this situation to conquer some properties. That's why we had developed the new law 1666, which liquidated loopholes related to decentralized registration. Similarly, we fine-tuned the business registration and protection of businesses. Thus, we increased security of property in Ukraine. Next came the law enforcement system reform. And doing this reform, we very extensively used the practical experience that we gained from the previous reform of state registration. Now we have more state registrators, we have no queues, we have no corruption, and all the proprietors, they are protected at the state level. Why I devote so much attention to the decentralization of registration services, because the schemes that existed, shadow schemes which existed here, they contributed to massive offenses, and when we put an end to those numerous offenses, some offenders moved to the law enforcement area. But we gradually liquidate loopholes in all the judiciary. Currently, we are reforming the judges' corps, we are reforming the courts, and now raidership, hostile mergers of companies had moved to courts. That's why we need to have fair courts. And as an element of this fair court system, we need to have the private enforcement system.
Партія приватних виконавців, вона
the first team of private enforcers will appear in Ukraine simultaneously with the newly elected judges, and thus we expect to have fair courts. Although I do not wish to say that we expect to have absolutely new courts very soon, someday in 1-2 months. We expect to implement this reform within maybe a year or even more. We experienced the need in longer period from our previous reform stages, and now delegating functions to the private law enforcers will be, of course, under our supervision. And when this would be done, we, like in the reform of state registration, we will establish a working group and analyze the negative feedback after primary work of private enforcement officers, then analyze the loopholes in our legislation and improve it. So next week we are having the second stage in our anti-raider reform meeting. We will discuss the outstanding issues to make the system optimal and to ensure that the system responds to the interests of business and Ukrainian people. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions?
Elena Chernetska, 24th channel. Do hackers often try to break your sites? Thank you for this question. Look, first, so our register was not broken. What happened, these were instances when, for example, a notary came to his office in the morning and called national police and or other law enforcement body and said that his key was stolen and someone was using his key and carried out some registration at night. And there were some cases like this. And in the media they said that our register was broken and they stole the key, but it is technically impossible. I will explain. In some cases, hackers hacked the computers of notary. They stole the key, and using this key, they carried out some registration. Why it happened? Because computers of the notary, they did not meet the security requirements. The requirements to security of the system. So law enforcement bodies now investigate the cases. There are suspicions that maybe they just opened some files in the evening and using Trojan hackers had access to electronic key. But then anti-raid law came into action and this law envisages another level of keys. The keys that correspond to European standards, they are used by state registers and there is no case of hacking because this is impossible. This key, this is a device that looks like previous key, but the registration action takes place in this device and it provides the result to the computer. So it is impossible to break it by hacking. You can just steal this key physically, but this is another case. And there were some cases, and I confirm this, when registers of property or business registers, they didn't work for some period of time. Why? Because there were some DOS attacks. First attack was repelled during 3 days because technically they were not ready, and in order to repel this attack they addressed for help to special communication offices and law enforcement bodies in order to get help and to repel these DOS attacks. These attacks happen every day, and in Pentagon, in order to repel such attacks, they spend millions of dollars a day. What is DOS attack? It is impossible to forecast this attack. You just have to repel it. So this is a lot of requests to one server, and because of so many requests, the site becomes disabled. So the maximum duration of break was 3 hours, and now this break is less than an hour. Thank you, Pavel. Next question. I have a question to Serhiy. Your forecast when private enforcers will have the exams and will be introduced. So the information will be on the site of the Ministry of Justice in several days. The first groups that are formed for training, then the information will be provided on the site, and in 20 days we will start training. They will undergo training for 23 days. After this, those who do not need to, they will form a group and then they will pass qualification exams. There will be a schedule provided by the Ministry of Justice for this group, and there will be schedule when the group will pass the exam. So this will be automated exam. The contestants will be undergoing tests in the group of 25, and there will be breaks after each tour. Physically, the Ministry of Justice won't be able to accept more than one exam session a day, because in this hall also arbitrary and notary officers, they also undergo exams, and once a week or once in 2 weeks there will be exams held. So if today there will be publication and 20 days past, then to 23 days, so only after this, maybe in March, first exam will be, it is possible to have it. So when they will, when they are introduced, so they should have exam, that they should have insurance, then they should show that their office corresponds all the requirements, then they get certificate, then they are registered. There will be a register of private enforcers, and you can find people on this list, and the insurance information and the working hours, all the information will be provided. If this person is deprived of license, you will be able to find the information about it on the site. So there is a technical possibility for this. Next question. Good afternoon, Gerek Maxim. I have 2 questions. Do all people who applied for training, are they all be accepted, and how do you form the list of those who will participate? As I understand, all those who applied, they will be accepted. There is special commission that is formed by proper bodies, so I do not know about any rejections. And all those who apply, and they will be allowed to participate. So the groups are formed according to the line, so in the proper order. Thank you for your answer. I would like to give you an example. I would like also to apply. I have the right to carry out activity like this. I applied to the institute, they got it, I paid the fees, and as of today, I don't know whether I am on the list of this group for the first round. So I applied in November, so I was one of the first among 50. So I applied personally, and I'm interested according to what principle these lists are formed. When maybe there are instances when people applied in January and they will be in the list, on the list, and such people like me who applied beforehand, are they going to be in the first wave? So you know, if you applied in November, you know, if I'm not mistaken, the information about application was provided in December. You should have applied after this information was provided. When the first application started, it didn't correspond to those requirements that are established. The information should have been provided in a more proper way. It should have been placed on the site, and only after this, the acceptance of this document should have been started, and these documents should have been verified, and the information should be provided about conclusion of the agreement. And after this, there should be payment of fees, and then the groups should have been formed. So this information, after which application and groups formation should have taken place, this information was provided in December. This is on the site of the Institute and the site of the Ministry of Justice. If you did everything correctly, so you should be in the group and you should get your number. And is it possible that people who applied in January be in the groups with those who applied earlier? I don't think that this is possible. So when the documents were sent, some people applied via post, others personally. There was a special commission created in order to see who goes to what group. On my example, I would like to show how the system works. So I applied personally. I applied to the institute, and they didn't provide a reply whether they confirm. So for me, the information is non-transparent. So I request by official letters. So I just wanted to know, maybe I just don't want to be sent to some third or fourth group. So you applied in November. After this, you followed whether there were some publications on the site of the Ministry of Justice or the site of the Institute. So if you did everything correctly, so there should be answer. So you can address the Ministry of Justice, please. You can do this, and you can also send requests to the Institute. When did you ask? So maybe, so what is your name? Thank you, dear colleagues. So this is end of press briefing. You can put your questions off records. Thank you.
Давайте.